Greetings, GVSU COE colleagues. I'm Rick Vandermolen, assistant professor in the master's degree program in educational leadership, and I also serve as the GPD for that same program. I'm sharing this video from a recent event we hosted called the Educational Leadership Admin Panel. This panel brings together K-12 admin leaders from across the state to discuss and share insights about the work and life as an administrator. You will hear our panelists share key insights for leadership practice and systems thinking for pre-pandemic and pandemic settings. I hope you'll enjoy this educational leadership event video that assists our candidates grow in their understanding of the real mission critical work occurring in K-12 schools across Michigan.
Hi everyone, my name is Sheila Fehrenbach. I am a first-year elementary principal in Suttons Bay, and my trajectory to lead me here kind of started in upper L education. I was a 5th grade teacher and a blended 4-5 teacher. During that time, I also sat on our district's leadership team for math curriculum and did some curriculum writing and some district level work that way. I then moved to an elementary interventionist position where I was responsible for the academics of a whole school and worked closely with the principal there. And then returned to a 6th grade math classroom before landing here this year.
Great, thanks Sheila. And a brand new principal in the middle of our global pandemic. So there's many questions
no difficulties whatsoever.
All right, I was excited to see Brandy Lovelady Mitchell as our panelist again this year. So Brandy, how about introducing yourself?
Good evening, everyone. I'm excited to be with you. I am a Laker, graduated from GVSU with my Ed Specialist degree. The number of titles I have held: I was a school counselor, comprehensive guidance classroom teacher, career-focused educational consultant, supervisor of student services, assistant principal, lead administrator, principal, and now director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The fact that you're on the screen aspiring to be a principal or some kind of educational leader, I think just speaks to the resilience as well as the strength of our profession. With all the pandemics that are happening right now, for folks to still show up means something. So I'm excited to unpack where I have been and to support you however I can. The other thing that I'll say is I work for a regional education agency. I work for Kent Intermediate School District. So when you think of it, it is over 21 public school districts. So that's the approach that I bring to tonight's panel.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that, Brandy, because that is a different trajectory too, and also very important. Next, we have John Blackburn. John, will you please introduce yourself to the participants?
Sure. You guys hear me? My screen's kind of weird. Okay. Yeah, John Blackburn here. I'm also a Laker at heart. I did my undergrad at Grand Valley. I got a teaching endorsement. Group science, elementary ed, taught for 5 years, got my master's at Grand Valley, and I'm 2 classes away from my ed specialist at Grand Valley. Also played baseball for Grand Valley, and I see Mr. Hosford on there. He probably doesn't remember me, but I was the equipment manager my last year. When I was my last year student teaching, I was equipment manager for Brian Kelly, the football team. I helped out there too as well. So great time, great experience at Grand Valley. Love the school, and I actually live in Allendale too. So, yeah, 17 years as a principal, taught for 5. I was elementary principal for 6, and then I was at the middle school, closed the school. We were at middle school 7-8 building, and then currently I'm at a 7-8-9 building. I'm at the old Wyoming Park building, but I'm a principal for 7-8-9, about 1,000 students. Yeah, for Wyoming Public Schools. So, and I'm just looking forward to providing any insights and helps and supports I can give you guys.
Great, John. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Danielle Jackson.
Good evening, everybody. Again, my name's Danielle Jackson, and I am the Chief Executive Officer for University Prep Schools. I see some of our UPrep crew on the call today. I'm very excited to be here. My journey to this role started as a teacher, and I became a lead teacher because I was interested. I was at a startup school, and we needed our books. So I was like, I'll be the lead social studies person so I can inventory and pass out all the books. Little did I know that my journey would lead me here. I will say my intense curiosity about how schools work and how to make them stronger led me to various leadership positions, including principalship, ultimately a chief academic officer, and now a CEO.
Excellent. Thank you, Danielle. Shawn Leonard.
Good evening, everyone. So my name is Shawn Leonard, and I serve as one of the senior directors of school quality for National Heritage Academies. My journey to this position began as a teacher in Detroit. I was at a school for 7 years as a teacher and assistant principal, transitioned to leading my own school as a principal in Southfield, and then transitioned from there to be a principal in Hamtramck, as well as a founding principal in Ypsilanti, and then began to supervise schools as a director of school quality in Michigan, Ohio, Georgia, Louisiana, Indiana, and now I'm a senior director and I supervise those same positions, servicing schools here in Michigan and Colorado. Excited to be here as a part of the same role, being a director of school quality. But I also work with our school leadership development team for National Heritage Academies, which, similar to you, we have aspiring teachers looking to be principals. And so we have a training program that we have within our organization that I've also been a part of over the past 7 years.
Great. Thank you, Shawn. Tom Hosford.
Good evening, everyone, and really impressed that you're taking time out of your busy schedules to be here tonight. That shows your level of engagement and definitely the level that Grand Valley helps students achieve. So kudos to you. Finished my undergrad degree at Grand Valley and went on to had an incredible experience. Was hired in Rockford, where I currently live and teach. Started as a middle school phys ed teacher, also a sixth grade classroom elective teacher for the students that did not want to take band or choir. So you can imagine what type of students that had an opportunity to interact with every day, which was a blast. I always had a passion for administration. I had an incredible role model, my father, who was a middle school principal and a central office administrator in Rockford, and just saw the impact that he was able to make on students and staff and families. And went back to Grand Valley to the master's program in ed leadership, and just had a phenomenal experience there. From teaching, I've had an interesting road as well, all in Rockford for the last 16 years in an administrative role. I've been in Rockford for 18 years, but started as a middle school athletic director, which was a kind of a part-time administrator role, part-time teacher, then a middle school assistant principal, a high school assistant principal, a elementary principal for 2 years, and then currently in this role that I'm at for the last 8 years as principal at the Rockford Freshman Center. I look forward to speaking with you all tonight. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Tom. I'm smiling because it sounds like, you weren't, I often say I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up at different levels, and it sounds the same, that you've been at many different levels. Brandy Menham.
Well, good evening, everybody, and thanks for the invitation. Another fellow Laker at heart here as well. I'm just really excited to spend some time with all of you. I got the opportunity earlier today to spend some time with some Hope students. So I feel like today's the day to be in front of Zoom with a lot of people who have a heart for the work we get to do. My journey started as a first grade classroom teacher in my home district in Baldwin once upon a time. And I taught for about 5 years, ended up pregnant with our twin daughters and bedridden with them, and never actually went back to the classroom. Once they were born, I got some really interesting opportunities to work nationally, doing some school improvement work. And that was just a wonderful opportunity. We worked in a lot of schools that were considered failing at the time. So we got to come in and really roll up our sleeves and work closely with teams in that space. I came back from doing that for about a year and then served as a school improvement director, and then was later hired as an ISD consultant for West Shore ESD up north in Ludington. Was there for about 9 years, and then transitioned to where I am now in Zeeland Public. I'm the assistant superintendent and in the central office role for Zeeland. And it's just the very best place to be. So I'm excited to see some of my fellow colleagues on the screen as well, and hopefully have something to offer all of you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Brandy. Thank you all. Now, briefly, I'd like to just introduce our professors who are here this evening. A quick hello, because I'm not sure that they're able to kind of see you or find you, but just to hear your voice and able to know that you're here. So first, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kathy Meyer-Looze, and I'm actually the Department Chair of Educational Leadership and Counseling. However, my heart is in educational leadership, which is why I am here with this administrative panel this evening. Rick Vandermolen.
Hey everybody, Rick Vandermolen. I'm the graduate program director for the master's degree in ed leadership, and I'm excited to be here with you tonight. I'm sorry that I haven't been more interactive up until this point because I've been running the tech in the background. So I'll try to get a little more interactive going forward.
And Suzanne.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking the time out tonight to be here with us. We're so happy. You'll hear our administrative panel has a lot of experience to share with you. So I know you'll have tons of questions for them. So welcome.
Thanks, Suzanne. And Gabby.
Hello, everyone. Welcome our guest speakers. Good to see old friends, and a shout out to my students from 685, 687. Good to have you all here. And also I'm very, very excited to meet new people and make new friends. So.
Thank you, Gabriella. And last but certainly not least, President Haas.
AKA G. Haas. But good to have you all here. And my new home now is in the College of Ed. Pleased to be there. I've been at the university now in my 15th year, 13 years as president, and now working back in the classroom where I've been since 1977. And so I'm thrilled to be part of this, learning a lot from my colleagues, and I continue to learn a lot from our students as well. And I'm thrilled to have the representation on this panel as well. So thanks for providing your time and expertise.
Thank you. So thank you to the professors that are here. Thank you to our panelists, and as well as our students. So as you can tell, we really have this broad range of experience and expertise and different positions. And we do this very intentionally to make sure that you can see all of the different leadership positions that there are that you may enter into and or that you may progress into. So we have everything from a traditional public school to charter school leadership to, like as Brandy had mentioned, an intermediate school district or Kent ISD. I think Brandy, though, actually I don't know if you changed your names to that. You mentioned an ESD, I believe. So when you think of your questions and you think of your own future goal areas or projections or what you want to do, think about asking these different people, anything that you wish, like how did they get there, or what kind of interview did they have, or whatever it is that you wish to know. At this time, we're going to put you actually into breakout rooms with a professor, and we are going to generate only about 4 to 5 questions right now, just to kind of get you thinking. And then hopefully, if the question isn't answered for you, like I said, you'll be able to have the opportunity to utilize the chat and ask a follow-up question or something like that. So I think, Rick, actually, I think about 8-9 minutes would be good because you're going to have a big room. So if you could put them in there till about 6 o'clock, that would be awesome.
Oh, I have my mic on, sorry. There's going to be about 18 people in each breakout room. So make sure that if you have a question that you want to share, you speak up, use the chat in your breakout room so that your facilitator, your faculty member is able to generate those 4 to 5 questions. And I'll send you into those rooms right now for the next 8 or 9 minutes till 6 o'clock.
All right, I believe we have everybody back. So we're just gonna have, like I said, round robin and panelists, whoever is, you feel it's appropriate to you or pertinent to you, please feel free to go ahead and answer. So we will start with group 1. Suzanne Richards, what's a question you have for the panelists?
So we had lots of questions for the panelists. So I'm going to sort through them a little bit here. And our group was wonderful at generating questions. One of the big ones I think that teachers have, what is the ideal candidate that you're looking for an administrator? And what we hear now that along with an ideal administrator, a teacher who wants to be an administrator, what is the job market at this point? People are hearing there are a lot of retirements, and are there truly openings for administrators this year?
I'll take the first crack at this question. For the first part, I would say we're looking for a school leader who is transformational. And the way that we describe that is you understand who you need to be in the moment in order to move progress forward. And that requires a level of emotional intelligence and social intelligence so that you can understand how to read a room, which connects to change leadership, which I think is the second big piece. The one constant in schools is change. And so it's how do you help shepherd your team through the ebbs and flows that happen in the arc of a school year. And then finally, someone who's results oriented. You understand that each year you want to be making progress, and how do you stay focused? It's very hard to stay focused within a school year because there's so much that can go on. And so how do you stay focused on the aim that you want to accomplish by year's end? As far as the market is concerned, that's a little tricky. I know for us, we really work hard to maintain our leadership ranks. But I always say you never know who's looking, you never know. So you're always ready. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
Thank you.
Is there a follow-up question with anybody to the panelists to that? So how difficult has it been to stay focused, so to speak, on student achievement and or a goal during this pandemic?
I'll start that one. Incredibly challenging. Some days it's just surviving the day, to be honest. And but having said that, that's what we do. That's our main purpose is to do what we can as adults and educators to help our students learn and grow every single day. So when you look at it from that aspect, the mental bandwidth has been taken up by a lot of challenges that we have zero control over: quarantining, positive testing, contact tracing, shutting down schools on a Friday to from face-to-face to transition into a virtual remote setting on Monday. So a lot of mental bandwidth has been exhausted with our teaching staff, which is why some days it feels like, let's just get through the day. And if we can make a positive impact or positive touch somehow, we'll call it a win. And we have to be okay with that and give ourselves a little grace for that, because we're dealing with something we've never dealt with before. But in the end, we're here for students and how we can help shape and mold and bring them up to be productive citizens and lifelong learners.
Great, thank you. Group 2, Gabriella, what question did you have?
Yes, I'm going to start with a question about ensuring buy-in as a new administrator. And the question has 2 parts. the first part is assuring the buy-in of your staff. And the second part, obviously, assuring the buy-in from your community. So how do you do that as a new principal?
I'm happy to take a stab at the first part of that. I would say oftentimes we kind of transition that concept of buy-in to ownership, you know, really believing if what you're doing and what you're bringing forward is something that you believe in, that buy-in isn't necessarily something that you have to be convinced of. And I would say it's really related or really rooted in relationships across the board with your staff, with your community, and being willing to be vulnerable, you know, putting yourself out there to want to develop those relationships. And once that work happens, then we can navigate through incredible challenges like we are this year. And without those relationships, that work is that much more difficult. So.
Thanks, Brandy. Sheila, did you, oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Sheila, from a first year perspective, do you have something a little different than that?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I would just add that I've been really surprised and excited and challenged by some of that buy-in starts with showing up. And I don't mean showing up at school. I mean showing up at the doors of students who aren't showing up at school, right? It's doing some really strange things. It's showing up as a bus aide at the end of the day and riding the bus with students when that person can't be there. It's really stepping into all these things and saying, this is not my job, but at the moment it actually is my job, right? It's my job to know what systems are, and it's my job to connect with every single kind of pinpoint of light in my district with my staff and my teachers and my students. And then the parent piece I would not leave out. I don't know how many of you are looking at leadership in a tiny district. I work in a tiny little district. You can drive to everybody's house at the end of the day, and you have to know every single one and whose cousins are whose and how to find their aunt and which grandma you might be able to call to get these kids connected here. Every little personal connection like that matters.
Brandy Lovelady Mitchell, did you have something to add to that? I apologize.
All is well. Really quickly, I was just going to underscore, to me, that also means really understanding that leadership means listening. Listening is very important to all of your stakeholders. And then the other piece is making sure that you have structures that allow for two-way feedback.
Kathy, I just want to add on to what Sheila mentioned. I think as a principal and even as a new principal, like your school community is watching you. So every little moment that you can take to build those relationships, to show that service leadership, it matters. And it matters to provide those deposits and building relationships when you want to start to build in that buy-in.
Thank you. Tejas, group 3, what question do you have for the panelists?
Well, everyone spoke up in my group, which was great, but this one is important, I think, to all of them. How do you take care of time management? How are you organized, especially when you have so many competing demands on your time?
Yeah, I learned early on, Dr. Haas, that that was something that I had to schedule for. And so, and not just schedule in my calendar for, you know, those priorities, but also scheduling time for me at work in my calendar to actually reflect and plan and long range plan and really think about that. And so using Outlook was a great way for me as a principal to be able to do that, because I would intentionally plan my time around doing those relationship buildings that we talked about before and getting in the classrooms and helping our deans be better with supporting our teachers, but then also planning out the time that I needed to plan on what was best for the school, long range planning that way. So being intentional with how you use your time is something that I had to do. And then even as a principal, I was a newly married with kids. And so something that I had to learn to do was to disconnect. So one of the rules that I worked on with my wife was once I got home, the cell phone would go away after a period of time, and I would stay connected with my family. So that was something
that I did have to work on, but you have to find your way, right?
I am curious, during this pandemic, how did that work for you, Shawn?
Well, pandemic's different.
All right. John, you're a middle school principal. I'm sure that time management too. I mean, just working with that's a lot going on there. What tips might you have?
Yeah, I would say, when I was an elementary principal, you don't really have an assistant. So you're kind of on an island. You're kind of doing everything. And I went from a building of 350 in my first year at the junior high at over 1,000 students. And you realize real quick that you can't do everything yourself. So for instance, I leaned on my assistant principal for some things, did a lot less discipline and focused on, instructional leadership and things like that. But it gets tough. I think especially I've had years when budgets were really tight. I remember one year I was a middle school 7-8 building, and all I had was a dean, and we didn't have anybody for athletics, so we were doing all the athletics. So it was basically that year. I want to say it was 80 to 90 hours a week, but we were laying teachers off and we were making cuts. It's it's the nature of the beast. I hate to say it, but my phone's 24/7. I mean, you never know what's going to happen. And usually when you get a phone call at 5 in the morning, it's usually never good. When that police officer calls you and tells you one of your kids committed suicide, that's never fun. So, it's tough, but it's rewarding. But it's hard. I think that's the hardest thing, is to shut it down. It really is, at least for me. But, I try to make time for my family and do those things, but there's really not a lot of downtime. The summer is a little bit downtime.
A couple practical maybe considerations that I have found that works real well with time management. You got to find something to manage and organize all the papers you get, whether that's a future file, whether that's a folder that you go to that this is real important and urgent, or I can, you kind of grade it. Is this something that I can delegate? Is this something that needs to be done now? Is this something I need to do, but I got a little time to do it? One thing that's really worked well for me is to manage my inbox. You can drown in emails, hundreds a day, easily, sometimes more, and they're all could be pretty important. So they're using, a simple program like I found followupthen.com. It's a free service where I can send this email out to this organization and it stores it until I tell it to come back. So if I need it, this is real important for me in 1 week, I'll say, 1 week at followupthen.com. And I know that I don't have to think about it. I don't have to remember where I put it. It's going to come back to me in an email at 6 in the morning, 1 week later. And now I know that that's something I have to deal with. So managing paper, managing your email inbox, and then managing phone calls, and documenting those. So you know who you called, when you called, just in case you need to refer back to it. And then what you can delegate. Sometimes you may not have someone you can delegate to, and you just have to kind of prioritize and task list. But there's a lot of different ways out there, and you got to find something that works for you.
Excellent practical advice. Speaking from someone who has 4 emails that I try to manage on a daily basis. Thank you. Rick Vandermolen, Group 4. Did you want me to pick one of your questions, or are you okay asking one of them?
I can ask. I just wanted you to have them just in case. We'll stick with that pandemic theme that Shawn kind of got us started on. How have you successfully navigated being an administrator during a pandemic? During the pandemic. We don't want her to be more than one pandemic. One's all we can handle.
I think I would just say I appreciate the positive presupposition there that we are successfully navigating it, because every day is an adventure. I think for me personally, it goes to the testament of our team. Just knowing that we're not doing this work alone, and we know that this isn't forever, thankfully. But it's the constant communication has been absolutely key, since we can't see each other face to face often, and we're getting more used to this type of experience, but it doesn't take the place necessarily of that in-person contact. Our communication has really had to be stepped up even more than what it would in a typical year. So just making sure that in a system of our size that we are communicating really clearly and frequently and listening along the way, and making sure that that what we're doing and the way that we're making these decisions is well informed by multiple stakeholders. And I think that just continues to be the path we'll be on for a while. You know, we knew that input and feedback was critical before, and certainly now as people are navigating things for the first time in some instances, we just really value what we're getting from our community and from our staff, and really approaching this as, you know, all hands on deck, and being there to support each other in the difficult spots and nudging each other along when you feel like some of the days are just really tough to handle, because there's been a number of those. But I think it goes back to that time management question as well. I think for many of us, from Friday the 13th of March until today, you know, there have been very little moments to take a breath and step back. We've just been right at it every single day. And so just trying to find ways to continue to fuel up to meet each day and the challenges that bring is really important.
Thank you, Brandy. Danielle, did you have something to add?
Sure. 60 days into my interim CEO role is when we had to shut down for COVID. And so one of the things that really resonated with me is that any crisis will reveal to you the strength of the relationships that you have, or the cracks that you have in them. And so I think it's being brutally honest about where sort of the gaps are in your communication, in your relationships, and being willing to own those and meet them head on, one bite of the elephant at a time, and then leveraging the parts of your community that really support moving things forward. You know, I think that's true personally and professionally, that any good crisis will tell you the truth about what you're doing. And I think if anything else, how we've postured ourselves is making a decision, like at the start, in the end, when this is over, who do we want to be? Where do we want to be? What do we want the story to be? And then once you develop that outcome, that strong outcome with key stakeholders, then every decision you make is in service of what you've decided to do. And that's really how we've approached leadership during this time.
Thank you. Suzanne Richards, we're back to you. What's another question that your students have?
So one of the questions that came out from several people is, when you're a teacher moving into an administrative role, as an administrator, how do you keep the teacher perspective in front of you as you make decisions?
Well, I would say, you know, speaking from my experiences, you know, you'll have a school improvement team, or you'll have a group of teachers that are your go-to people that you run decisions by. And I think, I don't know about the other administrators, but there's times where I'm subbing in the classroom to help a teacher out. They might have a doctor's appointment. They need to just leave 15 minutes early. I'd rather have them there most of the day and only have to leave 15 minutes early. So they really appreciate that. So it's those little things, but I just think it's it's just really getting feedback from folks, listening, you know, and if you have like assistant principals or deans and things like that, getting their feedback from even students, ask their opinions, and parents. You know, I think it's huge. I think it's that way. Not all decisions are just yours. Now there's some things you're going to have to make, you know, the tough decisions sometimes, but listen to all stakeholders.
I'm hearing that, yeah, communication is a theme. Communication and relationships is definitely a theme that's running tonight. Sheila, though, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you again, because this is your first year, and so you just came out of a teacher role, right? So where are you at with that transition, and how are you still keeping that teacher perspective in mind as you're navigating leadership?
Well, I will mention that in a year when we're having a pandemic and there are no substitutes, it's really easy to remember what it's like to be a teacher when you do it pretty much every day for some chunk of time. Highly recommended, maybe. I think the harder part is the question, how do you keep those teacher perspectives while also looking at the overarching picture of what needs to be done? Because oftentimes that teacher perspective of what one classroom needs isn't the whole picture of what your building needs to do next. And the harder step is figuring out how to communicate that bigger picture to those individual classroom teacher lens areas and kind of sizes. I would kind of echo what John said. He said, you always have a team. And if you don't have a team, you better find a team really fast. That's your go-to group of people to run things through. And that's your kind of your communicate up to the people above you and down to those teachers to include them in those conversations so that you're always looping that perspective from that teacher perspective and back up and then again.
As a newer administrator, you want to dive into those new administrative roles. That's what you think you need to do to show that you're an effective leader and to try to impress, like she said, the people above you, your bosses. But going back to something that Shawn said is, utilizing, going back to some time management and scheduling walk-ins. Just get into classrooms, not just your favorite teachers or the ones that you can relate with or the course or content you enjoy going to, but getting into those classrooms and physically seeing initiatives being executed and school improvement strategies being tried, and then you get a really good evidence about what really happens in a classroom. And in essence, you're putting yourself in the teacher's shoes. So it's almost like an empathy strategy as well, just trying to walk a mile with the people that you're trying to support so that you can support them better.
I see a lot of nods there. Brandy, Lovelady Mitchell, you were nodding with that too. And I know that you try to stay really close still in the positions that you have held. You still try to stay close to the classroom.
And one more thing, it's a hard thing to do that on a consistent basis. I have failed at that, especially this year, but it's still important to try because what you see is true education and true teaching. And that's how you make your best decisions, when you know what's going on.
I think it's prioritizing. It's making sure that you are prioritizing, right? What is it like when students and teachers get together in that classroom?
I just want to let me give an example. I do think it goes back to that time management and the prioritization. So putting it on your schedule to do the walkthroughs or the observations and getting into the classroom. One example that I have is this past, I'll say in the last 2 months, I scheduled myself to co-teach with a teacher virtually. One, to listen to students about what they were going through and how they're processing some of the social justice issues, but also just to navigate that virtual learning piece, because once you are an administrator, there is a step of removal. And so it was also being empathetic and just trying to immerse myself into the day-to-day operations. The difference was knowing that I could walk away from it, but it was the scheduling piece and being closer to the students and listening to them and their experiences, as well as walking a foot in what teachers are doing right now. Walking a couple steps, in the experience of teachers.
Thank you. Gabriella, how about your question from your group?
Yes, absolutely. How do you support your teachers to become teacher leaders so that they can transition to an admin role easier? And what kind of in-class experiences are most useful for a new out of the classroom position?
I'm happy to offer a perspective from my work in Zealand. We do have some incredible teacher leaders, and there's a good number of them across the system. And we have formalized positions for them, but we also have many teacher leaders, obviously, that aren't serving in those roles currently. So our work is always to continue to grow that group. And in our my first couple of years there, we revisited the job description to more carefully capture what it was that we were expecting from the lead teachers, but also what they could expect from us in terms of support to make sure that we're growing them professionally as well. And I would say one of the biggest, most meaningful and impactful experiences our teachers have had is around adaptive schools work. And I know that Brandy can attest to that as a trainer as well. The work is transformational, and it's something that wasn't existent in my system prior to my experience here. And it was something I've advocated heavily for. And so all of our current teacher leaders and all of our administrators across the board were some of the very first groups that went through that training. It's intensive 4-day training around just really growing in your ability to work collaboratively. And those structures and supports and systems have just been critical to our system. And we work at getting better at that daily and really see that as eventually something we'd like to get to our full district if at all possible. So that's been a win for us, hands down.
Something else that I just want to add on what Dr. Brandy said in terms of leadership. Leadership is not just when you have the title. So one of the things that I would do as a building level administrator was always look for opportunities for teachers to lead a project. And so I'm telling you all, when you see a problem in your community or in your school, not only identify the problem, but come up with solutions and perhaps take it to your administrators, and perhaps you will be one of the ones leading and resolving it. So it's okay to be able to be creative with initiatives and even show up with ways in how you could lead or co-lead in seeing some of those things through.
Thank you both, Brandy's. I'm sorry, Tom, were you going to add on to that?
Well, that's incredible perspective and 100% correct. One thing that I was lucky enough to be able to kind of start at our freshman center is something called a building improvement team. We all have that, but this was more of an after school. I want to, anyone's invited. It's led by a teacher, but whoever wants to come can come, and we talk about issues in the building. Frustrations, whether it's anything to do with the drinking fountain's broken, or my kids aren't learning using this type of strategy that we're trying to implement. And we just have good conversation and dialogue as a team, and it's not coming from the top down approach. It's a collective approach. And when that happens, you do, number one, right away you identify and can observe and see who your true teacher leaders are, who has that natural ability to help lead the building, someone that you trust, but there's buy-in. And when there's buy-in, you can move mountains. So great suggestions. The last couple questions there.
Tom, how about another question from your group? Oh, sorry, Tejas, you're muted.
What do you know now that you wish you knew when you got started in administration?
What do you know now that you wish you knew when you started? Who'd like to tackle that one? Go ahead. Yep, Brand.
I will say that you will hear people talk about relationships and you'll think, oh, that's cheesy. And we know that. But the quality of the adult relationships in your system will make or break or accelerate your work. And so if you think of Brene Brown's jar of marble analogy, you will not go wrong by pausing, taking time, and building relationships with everyone and anyone you can in your community to, again, accelerate the work, to move the work, and to be able to leverage relationships as you get to those heavy lifting topics. So relationships and even thinking about structures around student advisories, parent, guardian, community advisories.
And just to piggyback off that, because I'm a Brene Brown super fan, I wish I knew the vulnerability of leadership. You know, as you continue to grow as a leader, who you are is exposed. And you're asking for your parents to be vulnerable, your students to be vulnerable, your teachers to be vulnerable. You're asking them to, tell them what your needs are. And as a leader, you have to go first. And so just understanding that self-care, personal coaching, good therapist, all those things are very helpful to really gird you, to sort of gird your support up so that you're able to show yourself completely and vulnerably. People appreciate leadership that is willing to say, I made a mistake. I got that wrong. We can pivot this way, that way. It's so appreciated. Those are the deposits that your team they'll go to the wall for you because they know that you're a human just like they are.
Danielle, thank you so much for saying that, because I think many times what happens, especially as a new leader, is we think that as new leaders, we think we have to have all of the answers and we have to make all the decisions by ourselves. And what I hear many of you saying is, first of all, it's distributive, right? Like build the relationships and then make the decisions with the people that you have in whatever position that you are in. And yes, be kind to yourself. So thank you so much for saying that, because I think sometimes we try too hard to have all the answers.
Kathy, can I just add on to that and echo what both Brandy and Danielle said in their comments? I would just offer the perspective of making sure that you grow your network. It's unbelievable how supported you can feel in your position where it may be a question you can't even imagine figuring out the answer to. And then you look around you at people, not just within your own system, but outside of the system as well, that you can reach out to that have experiences that are different from yours, that bring an alternate perspective. And just the power of that network piece, whether it's in your virtual professional network on Twitter or email or what have you, or just getting yourself involved, connecting with other people outside of your district. It really enriches the work that you're able to do and offer the folks around you.
Yep, and helps you make you feel like you're not alone on an island. Yeah.
And Kathy, that was one of my struggles as a new leader, was this idea of having to be perfect and right. And I had to learn that you're going to make mistakes and it's okay. And you'll learn from those mistakes and be a better leader. And it was through those experiences that helped me along that path. But early on, that was a struggle.
Absolutely. Rick Vandermolen, what's another question that you have?
Well, let's continue with that theme a little bit. With something that Shawn just mentioned briefly, he's talking about his getting his start. What is most difficult during your first year, and how ready did you feel when you jumped into your new role?
Yeah, Sheila, how ready were you when you jumped in?
The thing that I'm starting to realize more than anything, interviewing for this position that I took, I'm in my home district. I've lived in this district for about 10 years and sent my kids elsewhere because I worked elsewhere. The biggest impact about me being ready for this role is whether it was the right role for me. And so I want to caution aspiring administrators to not get caught up in chasing a title, but to really, really reflect on whether a move is the right fit for you and is the thing you want to do next. And I say that because I was doing both. I had been chasing that title in my previous district, and I had put in an application. I was ready. I was interviewing for a different position. And this one came across my radar in my home with my people and my community. And I didn't think about the other one again, ever. Like, it never crossed my mind. All I could think about was what I could do in this space and what I could bring to this this community that I already cared so much about. So really the question is, you know, knowing yourself and knowing the impact you want to have has been the biggest part about any successes I've been able to do this year were because of being really clear with myself about what I needed to do next.
And I'm hearing you say the right fit.
Right.
So not just any position, but a position that's the right fit. Danielle, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I mentioned in my introduction about curiosity and how that sort of was really always my guidepost. And I would find myself being considered for different roles because I just would show up. And what Sheila's saying is so important, because the worst thing in the world is for you to get the job and then realize, you know what, I really don't like being in charge of the grown people. I want to go back to the little people, you know, so really being clear about, are you passionate about stakeholder engagement? Are you passionate about listening? You know, are you passionate about taking ownership of all the things that, you know, may or may not be going great? And if it still speaks to your spirit, then go for it. But if it doesn't, it's okay. It's so many opportunities for leadership whose title doesn't start with principal.
Oh, go ahead, Brandy. I was just going to read your comment, but go ahead.
Sorry about that. I did put something in the chat field related to, this is where the power of networking also comes into play. But I would also be remiss as the equity and inclusion person on the panel if I didn't speak to this topic about typically when you look at administration and the higher up you go, you see less females and you see less folks of color. I just have to be true to my work, y'all. So I just need to say this. So one of the things that we've also noticed is that women and people of color tend to scrutinize the checklist related to what's the criteria for the position and go over it a billion times and wait until every single box is checked. It is important to have good experiences that will set you up to do well. But it's also okay to seek out leadership opportunities to grow your muscle and to go after what you want. And when you don't get those positions, it's a good formative assessment related to what you might need to do next. So I'm saying be self-reflective related to your gifts and your talents. Do some gap analysis. Don't hold yourself back.
Thank you, Brandy. That's also really good advice. Kind of falls in line with, you know, it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to not know everything, right? To continue to grow and learn. Suzanne, do we have another question?
We do. So we'd like you panel members to think about the future. We know based on the pandemic, we're doing education way different than we've ever done it in the past. And our group would like to know, what are some of the things that we're doing now that when we go back to full-time in-person, what do you see we'll be keeping from the way we do our work today when we go back to normal in the future?
Go ahead, John. Were you ready to?
Oh, I said this at our administrative group meeting. I just think, you know, even the IEPs for parent meetings and things like that, I've noticed just the feedback I've got from a lot of parents, they really appreciate just have to, instead of having to come into the building and do an IEP or a parent meeting, to deal through the Zoom or through their phone. So I think there's going to be some things that we can take away from this, how we meet and how we interact with folks. Not to say, you know, that personal relationship of seeing someone face to face, you know, is good too. But I just think sometimes with busy lifestyles and parents and things like that, sometimes IEP meeting through Zoom or Google Meets or something has been very beneficial for parents.
I see a lot of our traditions kind of going away. What I mean by that is, so think about snow days here in Michigan. Why have them when we can still learn remotely, right? Or I remember as a principal, we would have going into winter break, knowing that kids were going to be gone for 2 weeks, we'd have our teachers work on these kind of elaborate learning packets that kids will work on. Well, what would that look like in this space now? So I do think that some of the traditions that we've had when it comes to how students learn and when students learn would be looked at a little bit differently now.
One major shift in my building, which has been a positive experience, is so we're to give you a little perspective. We have a 5-period day, trimester schedule, 71 minutes per class, and we light our hair on fire, and it's a sprint to the finish every single day to try to get the curriculum done. And we've been able to prioritize our standards and slow down a bit and utilize the technology just like we did today with breakout rooms. And we have different variations of those breakout rooms with different levels of students. And I see that continuing. It's a very efficient way to infer student learning and reflect on instruction. So just different groupings, especially at a high school level. And I'll just, I'll own it. And in my building, that wasn't a common practice. And, we always tried and we thought it was a great idea to implement. It was just one of those things that when it was all said and done, that's just something we had struggle implementing. And now we have the tools and ability and practice to implement that in an effective way. So I'm excited moving forward to utilize, groupings like this.
Great. Oh, go ahead.
Kathy, can I add, I think one thing that the pandemic has really laid bare for us is the incredible gap in access to education and all of the things that we know kids need. I'd like to close that gap, but I'm hoping that we don't go back to sort of pretending that when we send our kids out the door, they all have the same things in their homes and that everything we send out is gonna just, do exactly what we picture. I think that this pandemic has forced us to get really creative and really honest with ourselves about what things we can't count on kids having and how we can help change and adapt and support and repair relationships in ways that really help all kids access learning better. I hope that we can change that, but I really don't want us to go back to sort of pretending it's not there.
And I hope that it gives us permission to do what we've known for a long time, what is best practice, but have been too afraid to make those changes or change the system, so to speak. Gabriella, did you have another question?
Yes, I think there has been a little bit of talk about support for leaders, but I wonder if there are any other thoughts about where do you go as a school or district leader when you need help yourself? What do you do?
I think some people have talked about this, but just networking with other principals. I know when I started, I went right from the classroom to principal. I kind of had the guy that I took his spot and got promoted within our district. So he kind of served as a mentor. So it depends on the district and the size of the district. Really support each other. I know in our district, we have an elementary principals group, then we have a secondary principals group. We meet, but the high school principal and I might communicate on the phone 4 or 5 times a day. And also if you have assistant principal, lean on them, get their support on things and stuff like that. But even networking, I mean, especially when it comes to hiring staff, I mean, in Kent County and Ottawa County, I could probably, almost know almost every single principal there. So either through somebody else or through myself. So really networking and using your resources.
I'd echo what John said, and it also add not to be afraid to kind of reach out professionally, kind of beyond where we are. So, some of the experts in the field, the researchers that we read about and look up to, many of them make themselves very available through Twitter and email and such, and are real passionate about the work they do. So if it's a topic that has a real connection to the work that you're doing as a leader, and you reach out on behalf of your organization to some of those folks. I've just been amazed at the level of personal support you can get that way. People tease me about some of the connections I've been able to establish that have really moved our district work forward, that, you know, I've never dreamed to get a personal text from someone like Doug Reeves, but it happens. And it's because they care so much about the work that they do. They're pretty inspired to know that it's making an impact, or that you can see where that might work within your system and setting. So don't be afraid to look beyond where we are in Michigan and even the United States. Like, you know, dream big and reach out to people and make it happen.
I would just add, if there are professional dollars available for professional coaching that can be leveraged, I would strongly encourage you to do that, because you've got to find a place. And Shawn touched on this earlier, I touched on this. You got to find a place where you can go and be vulnerable. Like, here's what's happening, and having somebody to help you to navigate sort of what's true. You know, what is sort of your I'm not enough story that is causing you to maybe overanalyze a situation that you find yourself in as a leader. Just think it's helpful to have that safe space to be able to work through some of the challenges you have, particularly early on in your career.
Thank you. As I'm looking at the time and the promise that I made to you all about ending at 7 o'clock, here's how we're going to end the next 10 minutes. I'm going to have one more question, and then I will ask each of the panelists to have no more than a minute final thoughts for our students. And then at that time too, so Rick, I'm telling you, I'm cluing you on this because this is new. The students, if they have a question that hasn't been answered, I'm going to have them pose that in the chat so that you can copy and paste it. And then we, as faculty, can figure out how maybe what we want to do with those questions so that they are answered, okay? So one more question to the panelists, and then a final thought for each of the panelists that's no more than a minute. And then students, feel free to go ahead and populate some last minute questions that you may have that we as faculty will try to get back to you on. So T. Haas.
All right, this one, the rapid fire. So this was a pretty interesting question. How would a direct report describe you as a leader? 1 or 2 words, go.
John, go.
Passionate.
Shawn.
High care, high expectations.
Brandy Lovelady Mitchell.
Reflective, visionary.
Tom.
Servant leadership.
Brandy Lynn.
Caring listener.
Danielle.
Collaborative, decisive.
And Sheila.
Visible and positive.
All right. Okay, so panelists, a 1 minute final thoughts to our students. And whoever wants to go first is whoever's mic is off first.
I'll go.
All right, Shawn.
So I have 4. So hindsight, thinking about the transition into leadership, seeking to understand. So as you start to work with your community and serving your community, taking the time, taking the energy, seek to understand the needs and what you need to do to help the school continue to move forward. Hire the right team. So it's really important that you spend that time to find the right teammates when you have those openings. Hiring the right team really helps the job. Strive to be the best and learn from the best, and take that time to be able to do that. And then lastly, and this is something that I had to learn along the way, be a systems thinker.
Very important. Who's next? Tom.
I would say, in my opinion, we work in the greatest profession in the world. No other profession can such a positive impact be made on so many children, youth, and young men and women and their families. So let's keep that in mind as we sometimes trudge through government mandates, negative media. We work in the greatest profession, and it's an honor to be in this profession, and we need to take it seriously and honor our obligation to do what we can to make a positive impact on the students we interact with and the families that we support. Worry about what we have control over. Again, there's a lot of things that are thrown at us that we don't have control over. How do we make those things work in our system? And then, like Shawn said, find that team and work for that collective buy-in. Because like I said, when we can have good collective buy-in, it doesn't have to be everybody, but good teacher leaders, positive people in the building, we can move mountains and we can do anything.
Thank you, Tom. Who do we have? Oh, Danielle.
I would say it's so hard. I was like, I got to get in here because this is such good stuff, you know. My parting words is just to remember. I often say this phrase, you're either a learner or a teacher. It just depends on the room you're in. And so it's thinking about as you ascend into leadership, that you're a vessel and you're a vessel to help bring out of others what they already have. You know, it's just like with our students, you know, teachers and leaders have such great talent, and you're just listening for that opportunity through interactions and building relationships on how to put people in positions to be successful. And the other thing I would say is just be relentless in your pursuit. You know, be really clear about your personal mission and vision and how that aligns to the mission and vision of the schools that you'll lead, so that you can always be operating from that space. And the last thing is just grace. Grace for yourself, grace for your team, grace for your kids in the schools that you serve, because this is hard work, but it is the work. It is the work.
Thank you, Danielle. Sheila.
So I've been thinking a lot about something that Danielle, you said in the transition from the classroom to the principalship. I think the thing that's made the biggest impact on me was that I found my mentor 4 years ago when I was still a teacher. I have a person who I know I can be vulnerable with, and I can tell the hardest parts of my day to, and who will ask me those reflective questions to help me figure out what I need to do next. Start finding that person before you make that move. Figure out who that connected network is and who's going to really push you to figure out for yourself, not just tell you what comes next. If you have that in the transition, you'll be fine with whatever comes, even a pandemic, it turns out.
Thank you, Sheila. Brandy Lynn.
I would just echo what you just said, Sheila. You have to have those people around you that you can lean into, and just know that there's going to be challenging days ahead. And I always think about, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you, and that there's an opportunity to learn through all that we're moving through together. I would just say, somebody mentioned this earlier, if you don't have a passion for this work, if you don't feel a real burning in your heart for wanting to be that person that's standing up there when things are great, but also when they're really, really difficult, just do a lot of that soul searching to figure out if that's the spot that you want to be in. And if it is, then it'll carry you through those hard times, and you'll have that network that we talked about before, and you'll have those solid relationships around you. If it's not, that's okay too, because it takes all of us in the system to make a really good product for our kids. And that's really critical. I think the last piece I'd leave you with is just never underestimate the power of leadership that you have right now with whatever role you occupy within our setting. You're leading by example every single day, and you may not realize people that are watching you or seeing what you're doing or feeling like, why are you showing up at 5:30 after we've worked all day and sitting on the Zoom and being really engaged? That says something about you and your professional role. And just keep doing those things and find that right spot for you.
Thank you, Brandy Lynn. John, Brandy Lovelady Mitchell, Brandy.
Yeah, I can go. I'm thinking about this quote that I love, because I think that this time period that we are encountering is one that our kids and our grandchildren will reflect on for a long time. And the quote goes something like, "The eyes of the future are praying that we see beyond our times." I think that the thing that kids will remember goes to what Dr. Scott says. He said simply, on our worst day, we are our kids' best hope. And so as you think about leadership, know that this moment is not going to wait on you getting a title. In fact, it's how you show up without a title that will best position you to gain a title in terms of moving on your career ladder. The other thing that I want to say is we think so much about the leader we want to be, the leader that we want to be, like we dream about it. I'll claim it. I used to dream about it. It wasn't until I sat in the seat where I was like, oh man, I need to think about the leader I don't want to be also. And some of that came through some interactions, but I encourage you to think about the leader that you do not want to be as well. And my last thing is, while some people like me are saddled with these long names, I have this long name, that's my maiden name and my married name. And then I have this long title, diversity, equity, and inclusion. You too hold the title to be a weaver of equity in everything that you do. So as you think about putting a formal hat of leader on, make sure you're also holding the identity and needle of weaving equity and inclusion in everything that you do. If you don't do that, I would dare say that you need more work on putting on the glasses that help you see that there's always an equity and inclusion proposition in every decision and encounter that you'll make as a leader.
Thank you, Brandy. And final thoughts, John.
I just thinking back to when you're wondering when you want to make that jump to be a principal. I remember my former superintendent many years ago. I was at the time 26 years old, and I was he wanted me to interview for the principal job, and I said, well, I'm not ready. He goes, it's like kids, you're never ready, and if you wait till you're ready, you'll say you'll never be ready. So I think you really just gotta take that risk, take that jump, set yourself up with obviously going through like Grand Valley's Ed Leadership Program, taking on any leadership role you can in your district, whether it be on SI. I'll be honest with you, being a union rep too was very helpful, understanding the union side of things if you're in a public school. And just you're truly doing it because you want to make a difference. And I think sometimes administrators, we get bogged down in some things, but we really truly want to make a difference on a global scale. But you got to be a good listener and be flexible. So it can be very rewarding. And if I have a bad day, my best day is going in the classroom and just watching the kids, especially when I was elementary. I go down to the preschool or kindergarten room. That makes your day. You get hugs. I don't get hugs in middle school.
Those are some good final words. So panelists, I just want to really extend our deepest gratitude. You are inspirational, every single one of you. And just thank you for sharing your wisdom, and thank you for sharing your inspiration. Thank you for being with us this evening. I hope that you'll consider to be with us in future years too. There's so much that you have to share and to teach all of us. So we are very grateful to you. We're also going to show that gratitude. You will get a little bit of a token in your snail mail. I believe Rick Vandermolen asked for your address. And so Suzanne Rogers will be sending you something for taking part out of your day to be with us. Students, before you leave, please, like if you have some burning questions, do put them in the chat, and the Ed Leadership faculty will collect them all, and we'll decide what to do with them, because we certainly don't want to leave you hanging with some of the questions that you might have. So with that, it's 7:02. I promised you a hard stop. thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day in the middle of the week when I know it's during a busy time. So
Thanks, Kathy, for moderating this panel this evening. Appreciate it.